the natural colors of the sky, the mountains, the landscape, which was at that time a new approach, and it got people's attention. Now, the Northwest School was located in essentially two places. This is not a physical school, it's a conceptual school. It was located in Seattle, but it was also located in rural Skagit County. And primarily, exactly where I drew this circle here, in the western part of Skagit County from Mount Vernon out into the islands here. And that's where these folks worked at that time, in these two different places, and some of them went back and forth, and some of them hunkered down in little cabins and did their thing for months at a time. Now, this is a close-up of Skagit County here, and I want to highlight a couple things that are relevant to what we're talking about today. These three different locations in Cordes, the Swinomish Reservation, and LaConner are particular places where the Northwest School folks worked, but also in recent years, this is an area where climate change issues have been of interest to the local communities. I listed a number of things of concern here relative to sea level rise, storm surges, ocean acidification, increased flooding, all these sorts of things that already are occurring. So we feel like we have been able to observe some of these changes caused by a warmer climate in this area. The unique thing is that the local communities have become involved in these issues. You know, it's one of the climate change, one of those things everybody talks about. Most people don't really act on it very much, but there's some interesting things going on here. One of the outcomes of this was in 2018, this art exhibit at the Museum of Northwest Art in LaConner. If you haven't been there, I invite you to go. It's a very interesting place, well supported by the community. No admission charge, so that might be an attraction. And there's a brewery right next door, so what more could you want? But this exhibit was focused specifically on art science collaborations, and I am a member of this thing called the Skagit Climate Science Consortium, which is a group of about 12 of us scientists who focus on researching the area and or live there, which I do live in Skagit County. So this was the focus of the exhibit: climate change effects on Northwest systems and human communities. So that's kind of the setup here in terms of why we're here today, how this happened, and why it's in these particular places.
Okay, is that good? Okay. So, as Dave was saying, the result of this community conversation between these various entities in Skagit County was this exhibit, which you can see here at the Museum of Northwest Art. There were 21 artists teamed up with 13 scientists in a wide range of disciplines. As you can see from Dave's slide, there were geologists, estuary ecologists, Dave himself is a forest guy, and a wide range of artistic disciplines, a bunch of different media. All of the work was science-based, and it was all specific to particular research findings in the Skagit research area. The exhibit pretty much covered the watershed from the glaciers up at the top of the watershed in North Cascades National Park, all the way out to the saltwater. There was a lot of great work in the exhibit. I'm just going to show you a little bit, just a tiny sampling of some of what was there. In this slide, you can see Mary Ashton's work on the left, dealing with glaciers and Area Dub, large-scale paintings, really wonderful stuff. Here, this is an installation. The idea here was that this is 10 feet high, and this refers to the depth of water that would be happening in 2040 under certain conditions in certain locations in the Skagit Delta. And the idea was to give you some experience of what might it be like if I was standing right here with 10 feet of water. This display this is knitted, and the idea is that these are all records of daily temperature across a series of years in a particular location. This is a dissection house. This is some really beautiful work. Another artist who also worked with Dave on touching on forest fire and insect infestation as a cause of forest fire. So this is a tiny little notion of some of what was in the exhibit. There's a lot more. You can see that there were a lot of different ways into the scientific findings. There were a lot of different ways of thinking about how to convey the material, a lot of different angles of perception. A little bit about how we all got connected. Dave and I didn't know each other prior to this. The museum, Mona for shorthand up there, did what they called a mixer with speed dating. A number of the scientists who were interested in being involved and some of the artists had a chance to present at an evening. So we had some sense of what folks were doing, and then a chance afterwards to just kind of mix around and talk to people. Some people already knew each other, some didn't. Dave and I met there for the first time, and he had spoken really nicely about forests and also his interest in arts. And I was already working on some material that was leading in the direction of what we did together, and so it seemed like a good fit. We chatted, and then chatted some more, and decided to work together. What we did, we made a 7.5 minute long animation focused on the flow of forest carbon and consequences of changing conditions in the forests in that area, around the notion of the forest as a carbon sink and some of the dynamics of that. And so we're looking at photosynthesis and what happens as a consequence of increasing drought, and some of the ways that the forest might change over a period of time with some of the things that we're starting to see and expecting to see. In this image, let's see, where's the light here? You'll see it. Actually, no, we don't have this in the animation. This is a little carbon dioxide molecule in the animation that's actually spinning around. We're not going to show you the whole animation. You'll see part of it. Here's another little section. These are screen captures of the animation timeline. So not the animation itself, but of the working timeline that I used to put the imagery together. Dave and I spent some time together. We had a chance to talk both about my work process, and also I had a really lovely opportunity to hang out with him in his own forest that he has, and to try to get a sense both of how he thinks about the forest from his deeply informed perspective as a scientist, and also to just hang out a little bit and get my own sense of what does it feel like, what's sort of experientially, what's it like. Just looking. I didn't take photographs. I was just looking, and of course we're all in the forest a lot, and I am as well. So every time I was out there during this part of the process, I was just sort of sensing what's going on. Dave's wife is also an artist, and so we had some really nice conversation about that. Here you can see just a little bit of what that looks like in motion. And in the conversation with Dave, trying to just sort of move into what are the processes like that are happening in this environment. So this is sort of a look at photosynthesis, carbon dioxide being absorbed. And one challenge, I would say, a little bit on the project with Dave's depth of expertise is so great that I was only able to use a tiny fraction of what he knows about this. But he was actually quite amenable to, I won't say glossing over certain things, but he was comfortable with the level of simplification. So here's another screen capture moving into forest fire, releasing the carbon dioxide that was absorbed in photosynthesis. We'll talk about this more, I think, as we're talking with Sarah, but one of the tasks for me as the artist on this project was trying to figure out what's the emotional range for this work. And of course, that's a big question, I think, for all of us now. We're all dealing with a pretty significant emotional response to what's been happening. But Dave, as a scientist, was sort of helping me to understand what are some of the parameters on the actual probabilities of different things that might happen. Hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit more. And back over to Dave for a few more comments, and then we'll look at a little more extended piece of the animation, not the whole of it, but a little bit more.
So when I say the word climate change, how many of you get kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling? How many of you feel kind of depressed about it? Yeah, most everybody. That's a problem. That's our challenge right now in terms of communicating about climate change. I've been doing research on climate change for about 30 years. So we have 30 years of climate change science to go behind us. And the question is, what can we say now that's new or different? What can we say that will resonate with people? And so this business of it being depressing is one of the social challenges that we have, and it's a challenge that I have with my own science in terms of how, when, and where should I say things about climate change. These days, I prefer not to talk about climate change effects and problems so much as I talk about opportunities and ways that things can change. And we have about 10 years of social science literature that tells us that's the only thing that works. Unless you say things in a positive context, an encouraging context, people will not become engaged and do anything about climate change. This is particularly true of younger folks. So I really shifted how I go about things, and I looked at this opportunity to collaborate with Rachel and several other artists as a way to communicate in a beautiful way, in a way that inspires people about nature in general, and secondarily about how one could become immersed in this thing called climate change and maybe do something about it. At this exhibit, Rachel showed you a couple of the things there. I saw people at this exhibit who were weeping as they stood in there. And it wasn't because, oh, this is so awful, it was just that they connected with the art. And I think probably everybody in this room has had that same experience. When you encounter beauty that is so great it affects you emotionally. That's probably the target of most artists, I think, in some ways. Scientists don't get that opportunity so often. And so this is a way for me to connect with Rachel and communicate some things in a way that contained beauty and resonated with people. There were, I think, over 2,000 people who came to this exhibit. That's a heck of a lot more people than read my journal articles, believe me. So I feel like this was a new way for me to say some things in a way that resonates with people of all ages, all kinds of backgrounds, including younger people, which is the group I really like to target these days. And I think it's very important that we think about how we communicate things and elevate people and empower them to do something about this as we move forward and keep focused on this positive messaging.
So we'll just close this part with a quick look at what you'll see here is sort of the second half of the animation. You saw a little bit at the beginning that was sort of photosynthesis. The way the animation as a whole goes, the first part of it is we're in this very lovely forest environment with these beautiful natural processes going on. Then things change a little bit. So we're going to jump in just as glucose is being formed, and then we're going to go on through some climate consequences, but you'll see that partly with Dave's encouragement, tried to wrap it up on a little bit of an upload. Oh yes, could we do that, please? Yes, thank you.
Do you need the mic, Rachel?
I'm done.
Okay. All the lights?
All of them?
One more.
You get that one as well? There we go, thank you.
We're going to now sit down with Rachel and Dave and ask them some questions about the collaboration itself. So you've had a chance to see the product of the collaboration, and we're going to ask some questions. I'm going to ask them about how they collaborate. We're going to share this mic. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm going to skip over my first question, which was, why did you decide to collaborate? I think because we heard about that, or maybe there's more you'd like to say on that question of why did you decide to choose each other as partners in this effort? Was there anything else you'd like to say last?
I think it's kind of an interesting thing, you know, why and how do people connect? And as Rachel mentioned, my wife Linda is an artist, and she's back there. She's willing to raise her hand. Raise your hand. There she is. Okay. She's a painter, and she paints impressionistic landscapes and lots of other beautiful things. So I was sort of pre-trained already. You know, we've been working on this for quite a while now, at this intersection of science and art. And she's very good at science, and I know a little bit about art. Anyway, I knew that there's a different language that scientists and artists have. So I found that to be a significant barrier with some of the folks I met at the speed dating event. And there were some things that just weren't getting communicated, but I sensed with Rachel and others that there was, first of all, this very innate love of nature that inspired them to do what they do. And also that they had taken at least a little time to understand science. And so for me, those were kind of the tangible things that, in retrospect, I think helped make the connection.
Yeah, I would say David was definitely pre-trained, and it was actually sort of noticeable even in his presentation, which is part of why I approached him and said, oh, he's good. He'll be good to work with. Practically speaking, as far as why I collaborate, for this particular exhibit, which I became aware of actually thanks to Sarah, and what is now worthwhile. As an artist, you couldn't get into it unless you had a science partner. So there's that to begin with, was the criterion for being in it at all. But also from where I was, you know, I've been working on stuff around photosynthesis and forest carbon and so on already. But the idea of having a really expert scientist partner was really attractive to me because it has, as soon as I started working on this from the beginning, it was really important to me that I stay within the science, or at least to not be misleading people on the stuff that I was doing. Because in the climate context, we all know that's incredibly important. So for me, having a science partner was attractive for its own sake, and then Dave seemed like the right guy.
And I'm going to follow up and maybe drill in a little bit quickly. Did you have any doubts before you started about working with an artist on the one hand or working with a scientist? And what might those have been? So for those of us who are needing to overcome some of those doubts, what were your doubts?
I didn't have any doubts this time around because there was a previous surge exhibit before this one. It's much smaller, far fewer scientists. And I think I probably kind of worked out the kinks, and then the uncertainties I had were behind me. I think mainly it's the internal decision to make the commitment to do this stuff. You know, this isn't something you can do halfway. And I'll have to admit that a couple of the other scientists I worked with as part of this exhibit, we didn't talk very much. It was more of me providing quality control and whether or not they got the science right. That's cool, that's fine, and I think that's good. But there wasn't a connection in terms of actually collaborating towards something that would emerge above and beyond just that quality control piece. So I think that's how I felt about it.
There were things that I was really concerned about beforehand. I guess like Dave, I was also pre-trained to collaborate because in my other non-artist life, including here at UW, I spent a lot of time in public sector stuff, interagency collaboration. I was actually leading some of that myself. Here at UW, I was involved in a lot of interdisciplinary stuff. And I had also done a lot of work with social scientists, some of which was research to policy translation. So I kind of knew from that what's it like to work across some of those boundaries, and I've also spent quite a bit of time with academics. So I had an idea about that as well. And I knew from my past experience, it's not always easy to collaborate by any means. And I had seen a lot of what some of those barriers can be like. So, but I think a lot because of the experience I've had with the social scientists, I sort of knew here are the ways that I'm probably going to have to adapt a little bit. It wasn't really about Dave himself. It was just simply if you're working with people who work in scientific method, you're going to have to adapt in certain ways. And sometimes that felt like a little bit of constraint, again, not personal to Dave, but specific to the project. But yeah.
And I think, also I was encouraged to do this project because during my career, I think the best projects I've been involved with, the ones that had the most impact, the ones that had the biggest difference in terms of making something happen, were almost always interdisciplinary. In science, academia in particular, it's most of it's scientists talking to each other. It's like talking to the wall. It doesn't go very far out of the room, and it may or may not have a big impact in later years. But I've always found that being in interdisciplinary groups is interesting. First of all, you tend to get more engaged. You learn something. Things are exchanged, and things kind of bubble up that would not have bubbled up if I was sitting in a room talking to a bunch of other ecologists like myself. So I seek this out now more than I've started boycotting going to scientific conferences, because it's like, wow, I think I heard this 30 years ago, and also because of carbon guilt. But it's just I learn more by collaborating with people outside of my expertise at this point in my life.
So I think you've started to touch on this next question, but I think it's really important. One, I just want to reiterate this idea of sort of being pre-primed in some way. And this is a theme that came up at our previous monthly panel as well. And something, I think that's a key principle to learn, is having had already some experience in this work before endeavoring a collaboration of this nature. You've been starting to touch on this question. Maybe we can approach it more specifically. How has this collaboration changed you? How has it changed how you perceive your collaborators' field as well as your own? Has it changed the way you would approach a future collaboration? Has anything surprised you about what you've learned or how you've been changed through your relationship?
I don't know that I've been surprised exactly, but I think some things have definitely changed. One of the things I think that I was really impressed by, and I would even say moved by, was the depth of dedication on Dave's part, and also some of his fellow scientists in this context of putting on this art thing, which is kind of a stretch for them. It's not within their professional incentive structure to go to an art exhibit. But they were doing it because they care about the issue and about communicating with the public. And I guess, I felt like I had a much deeper take on that. And also, of course, many opportunities to see just how deep Dave's understanding of many of these things are, which is cool in and of itself, and also impressive. One of the things that I learned a bunch of things from him about specifics about things like, okay, how does the forest work? What's the intermediary when you have a drought situation developing, the big intermediary in terms of fires and insects, which I didn't really get a chance to deal with. So there were some concrete things like that that I thought were interesting and potentially fruitful for something else down the line. But actually my favorite thing that he said to me that really got me thinking was, he was talking to me about emergent properties of the forest, which I probably still don't totally understand what that means. But the way that I took it was that basically the forest is this really complex system, not well enough understood as a whole for us to be able to predict exactly what's going to happen with it as a whole. And for me, that spoke to the artist in me, which is they have this sort of non-analytic, non-verbal experience of the forest as this place of mystery, basically. And as the artist on this project, once he said that to me, I thought, okay, now I have some license to just go, be a little more abstract and so on. So that was something that I think was really going to stay with me.
thing I really learned was we can still go back to basics and be interesting and educational. So we just saw this amazing video of carbon dioxide molecules and water molecules. I mean, everybody knows what those are. We've all seen diagrams, had that in probably going back to 3rd grade, but it's still fresh and it's relevant to the global problem of climate change. And I think I saw this opportunity to make that connection. It doesn't have to be overly complex to be to resonate with people. On the flip side of that, that cool animation you just saw, you have no idea how many hours Rachel put into that, using this software on her computer that I would never, ever be able to learn. So there's that back end of it. You have to be super committed to making something that's simple, high quality, so that it does resonate with people. And that goes to the next comment I was going to make, was that the reason this exhibit worked was because there was a high level of commitment by everyone involved, from the artists to the scientists, and especially by the museum staff, who had to pull everything together, deal with very diverse personalities in some cases, and still make this happen. But it was kind of a neat collective sense of the group in this respect, that we were all doing something kind of special. And the museum's going to do it again, apparently. They like this, and it does seem to connect with the community. The one thing I was a little disappointed with, we didn't have very many young people involved with this.
It's very true. Yeah, actually.
Not that we're old, but you know what I mean. Okay. And there's a lot of young artists out there, and I think when we do this again, it would be pretty nice to engage younger age group, more diverse age group in many different ways, to maybe tell some different stories.
Just a quick observation to add on to that. At the mixer, the speed dating, that was actually sort of a funny idea to be there speed dating to meet folks, especially because, as it turned out, all of the scientists, I think without exception, were men. And I think virtually all of the artists who were there that night were women of a certain age. And I think everybody was white, pretty much. Yeah. So that was striking. It meant that I thought, perhaps one can expect some gender dynamics here. Dave was great, but it was just it was interesting. So I think there's definitely stuff to think about. There's definitely stuff to think about there.
Thank you, and I'm just going to pause for a moment because I'm still learning how to choreograph and stage such a thing. I want to ask us to switch places, because I noticed a lot of straining of necks.
Center the artist.
Much better. Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to skip to the challenging part. So what was most difficult for you about this collaboration? Were there any points, I'm a collaborator, so I can speak honestly about this, that there are points where one might feel like throwing in the towel and stopping or deciding that this isn't working. So were there any points like that, if you're willing to share and be honest with each other? And then what enabled you to move past that point if there were such difficulties?
In working with Rachel is very comfortable, first because she's a low-key person, she's a good communicator, and your work proceeded incrementally over time. Whereas some of the other artists that I work with, we couldn't get in touch with each other, or they wouldn't do anything for 6 months, and then all of a sudden, could I take a look at this and give them feedback within 5 days? And so it was kind of sporadic. That was not comfortable for me. I felt like we didn't have a good dialogue, but this was perfect.
Yeah, I felt like there was no point where I wanted to quit because of anything Dave did. I have thought about what's involved for me in making visual or expressive work that relates to a science topic, especially a really super freighted one like climate change. And Dave was the scientist on the other end of this for me, so it's not really about Dave, it was simply about the subject matter and the constraints of this particular sort of theme. I wouldn't say there was at the time where I was ready to quit, but there were times where I was frustrated or kind of worn out. Some of that was me coming up against the limits of my self-taught animation skills. More of it was about the subject matter, and especially I can remember at the time that I was working on that fire sequence. I'm from California. We were having smoke up here, and I had been down there. A bunch of people in my family and friends had been having to flee from different places in California at the time that I was working on that stuff. And part of me was kind of like, I don't even want to do this right now. It's just too intense. And I'm not reflecting. As an artist, I'm in this project, I was feeling, this has come up for me in other instances too, where my own personal expressive response to the situation is probably not coming fully out in this piece. And I'm willing to be constrained by that for purposes of this project. But I'm sort of, as a creative person, I'm sort of conscious that there's more maybe that I would feel or that I would say. And it actually gets to something that I thought was really interesting, and having a chance to work with Dave and be in contact with some of the other artists and scientists as well, is this issue of how you are authentic or honest in this work, which is, I think, for scientists, that's obviously, being accurate and truthful is obviously a huge thing. And I think it's also a thing for artists, but in a different way. If you're being sort of authentic or honest with your personal response to something. And I experience those things as being a little bit in tension. And again, not anything personal today, it was just for the fact that this was an art science project. And fruitful, much more fruitful than not. It was terrific to do it. But if you're asking about where the tensions were, where I struggled sometimes a little bit, that was it.
If I may, I think, I observed one of your challenges was you had so many ideas and so many different things you wanted to communicate and express, and that at some point you had to constrain it to 7 minutes or something, and you probably could have done a couple hours. So that there was a logistic and practical boundary there that you just had to deal with at some point.
I had to leave the bugs out. I really wanted to do insect galleries, but the thing with the bark beetles making these incredible galleries that are so beautiful in the bark, I really wanted to animate the little bugs chewing their way through all that stuff. I knew I was never going to be able to do that in that time. Fortunately, several of Dave's other artists did a really beautiful job with that particular thing in other ways. So in the exhibit as a whole, the question of insect infestation was totally covered, just not by me.
So I'm going to ask one last question before we open it up to the audience for some questions. What are some of the key things you did, specific things, maybe in the way that you met or frequency or types of conversations, the key strategies that enabled your collaboration to be successful? Were there concrete things that you would want to share with others and sort of to recommend that enabled your collaboration to be successful?
Well, this is kind of obvious, but I think frequent communication kept us on track, and each conversation we had ended up with some kind of action item or some kind of resolution of what happens next, and that's, I tend to be kind of OCD, and I like that. I want to know what's happening at each stage, so that was perfect. But I think just having out to our property and walking around was kind of a milestone for me, and I did that with a couple of the other artists, and not talking about the art, not talking about the science, just talking about your experience of being in the woods together and what you're observing. And that takes the dialogue to a different level of communication that's more of a friendship as opposed to a business relationship.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I think the time that we had together was really important. I know for me, kind of psychologically, as I entered into this, I was probably a little apprehensive. I was just like, this guy seems great, but I don't really know him. How's it going to be to work together? And I know from past experience that this can be challenging sometimes in certain ways. But as Dave said, I think we had a really lovely chance to get to know each other. We did meet on a couple other occasions besides. And I know that I was sort of aware that at a certain point, like, oh, Dave and I actually have a relationship now. And we're a little less formal with each other than we were at the beginning, let's say. I can rely on that to kind of sustain our connection just as people. And that I think that was really important. And I think that is, from other experiences, I think that's really important to any kind of collaboration, actually, relationship building.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you'll get to share that. I'd like to open the floor. So actually, let's thank Rachel and Dave. And now let's open the floor for some questions. There's a hand back there.
How is your project funded?
Repeat the question.
Well, the question was, how was the project funded? And so the Museum of Northwest Art in LaConner had dedicated funding for the exhibit and for the employing the people who curated and interpreted the exhibit. The museum there has an enormous group of docents who contributed probably hundreds to thousands of hours of time. And otherwise, it was, in terms of my time, I just volunteered. Rachel's an artist, so this is her professional time. I don't know how you want to respond to that.
The artists actually were given a stipend, because the assumption was, the way it was set up was at the beginning, which was like, they started this process almost, I think it was a year and a half, like a year and a few months before this exhibit actually opened, and that was from past experience where they hadn't had enough time for artists and scientists to form a relationship. So there was a lot of lead time built in, and you had to submit a proposal and have that accepted. The assumption was the artists were going to be spending some time on this, and you couldn't just submit something you'd already done. You were supposed to generate something with your scientist. And so the premise was, you're going to do some work. There was a stipend, $200. $250. What's that? Yeah, that's right. It was for love, basically.
So what happened to the exhibit at the museum? Is it now is it touring around? You said it's going to go back to LaConner, but is it going to come to Seattle as a full exhibit?
The question is, what's happened to the exhibit? Is it going to go on tour?
Well, individual pieces have been shown in other places. There was a discussion right at the end of the exhibit, wouldn't it be cool if we could take this and go somewhere else? There were some inquiries about that, and it did not seem feasible at the time. But you have certainly extended your exhibit.
Yeah, I think that the issue was that the exhibit wasn't conceived as a traveling exhibit from the beginning. And so it looked like that installation I showed you, it's 10 feet tall, and there's some really big stuff in there. There's a huge range of kinds of things, from really large installation, all kinds of stuff. So it wasn't conceived as something that would travel. But I know that I have taken this animation in other places, formally and informally, and I know that a number of the other artists have also done that with their work. Have moved it to other places and have continued also to do that in dialogue with their scientist. Dave and I have continued our relationship, but I think we're not the only ones to have done that. And my sense was that, the other thing was that the Skagit Climate Science Consortium, which was the co-sponsor of this that Dave is a member of, I'm not sure what is the status of this right now, but there was an attempt to carefully document the whole exhibit and have it represented online in a complete way on the Skagit Climate Science Consortium. I'm not sure where that was the intention. I don't know where that is right now.
Darcy?
I'm just wondering if the museum provided a mechanism for you to give feedback about your collaboration, because it seems like some of the lessons you learned would be really helpful in if they do this again, as people apply or start their relationships with each other. It could be helpful to hear some of the things others have learned.
Did the museum request this kind of feedback for the next iteration of the exhibit so the future artists and scientists can learn lessons?
Yeah, there most definitely was a post-mortem kind of breakdown of issues, what went well, what didn't go so well, what could we do better next time. And about, let's see, 2 months ago, we had an initial kind of pre-meeting with the museum staff about the next exhibit, and all of that's going to get considered. I think, you know, there were some things that could have gone better with the facility in terms of providing technical support for an animation that's on a big wall on a big screen with sound, which wasn't a smooth process at all. And those kinds of things that were logistic in nature. But I also think that there was some disagreement about exactly who gets to be in that exhibit. You know, there's kind of a screening process for the quality of the art and for the ideas and so forth. And I don't know where that stands at the moment, but those were the kinds of things that came up. But people were uniformly happy with the overall quality of it. They had good attendance. There were a number of side events that were held every few weeks that engaged the community. And I'm going to come back to my issue of young people. That's going to be my suggestion. Next time we have to make a much better effort to get younger and more diverse participation in this event. I think that would make a huge improvement. And the other thing, while I'm editorializing, is I think this next exhibit, I'm going to encourage that we have a strong component of solutions-based exhibits. I'm not sure what that even is, but I want to get beyond the gloom and doom.
Just to agree with you on that last point, I think pretty much what was partly the way the exhibit was framed from the outset, which was climate impacts in the Skagit River watershed. And so the artwork was addressing impacts. But I would just agree that I think anytime you're talking about climate impacts, you ought to be talking about solutions at the same time. Just because people need that.
The interesting thing was they did have a little part of the exhibit where people could write suggestions, and there was one part that was really more for kids. And they'd ask things like, what would you do about climate change? And they had tons of submissions of things, you know, little drawings from kids and suggestions and so forth. So they were thinking about it. I think we just need to customize the information and the art to elicit more of that next time.
Thank you. Let's just take a couple more questions. I think I saw one here.
Yeah, I'm curious, now that your art is out there in the world, have there been any surprises about the reception of the art? Do you feel like there's been people responding to your work in positive ways that tell you that it's been received and communicate science to the public?
So questions about has the response to your work by the public been surprising, and has it shown positive results in how you've managed to communicate science?
At the exhibit itself, I think, as Dave said, the exhibit as a whole was really well received. There was a lot of great work. There was a huge amount of science in the exhibit, by the way. If you took the time to read all of the wall panels, all the wall text, there's a lot of didactic in there, and there's a lot of scientific information in there if you actually read it all. I think, you know, it was all well received. I think in my piece I got, you know, nice feedback on it at the exhibit. What I notice about this animation and people's response to it, I've shown it here and there. It hasn't been, you know, hugely seen since then, but in different places for periods of time a little bit. The thing that strikes me the most in the response to that, to this particular thing, is sort of the affect. It's slow, and there's a section that is, you know, maybe a little dark, but a lot of it isn't. And I notice there seems to be sort of a need out there for people to just be in something that's slow and a bit meditative. And I was very purposeful about that. And partly with all the work that I've done on this is partly I'm trying to calm myself down. That's part of it. So I can sort of see that same thing applies with other folks, especially in this context. We're all, you know. So that's one of the things I've noticed.
It's interesting you should say that, because there was another exhibit that showed images of glaciers, like glaciers 100 years ago, glaciers now, and kind of dissolve in imagery of these changes in glaciers. It could be kind of depressing as you see the glaciers disappear in the North Cascades. But I found that people would stop there and pay attention to it for a few minutes. Whereas a lot of times in art galleries, you see people just kind of cruising the perimeter, and once in a while they'll stop and look at something. In this exhibit, people seem to look at every single thing and spend a little time with it. And part of that was trying to figure out what is this trying to say, which is good. You know, that it doesn't have to be super clear to engage people, get their attention, and have some passion. So I think that was one of the things I learned, that you have to find a subject matter and a way of communicating that gets people to stop for a few seconds and, you know, get out of the stimulus world a little bit. In terms of, you know, how this would affect my science and communication and so forth, I think the jury's out on that. You know, I've talked to a number of scientific colleagues about this. I think they kind of like it, but they're not convinced this is a good thing to spend time on, or maybe just haven't taken that leap of faith yet, or aren't married to artists like I have the benefit of being. So I think we'll see. I think, you know, if we do this, when we do this exhibit again, we'll probably do a better job of it. And then our friends from Bainbridge who I met today, if you do this, you might have a completely different take on it and find some other options for how to communicate things. So I think that's the beauty of this shared learning that we have of communicating with some of you today.
We have, okay. I was going to take one more quick question if anybody has one. Looks like it's, oh, one in the back, one question.
Was there any collaboration with the communities?
I can't hear the question.
Was there any collaboration with Native communities when you did it?
Were there any collaborations with Native communities in the exhibit?
This Skagit Climate Science Consortium that was mentioned a couple times now, the Swinomish tribe is involved with that. They have a representative on our group, always have. They're very interested in water-based issues, fish in particular, to a certain extent forestry. Because the reservation is located right on the water, they have legitimate concerns there. So that was represented. There was one Native Alaskan artist who was involved with it as well. And I think that was, so I feel like the Swinomish tribe had some input to the process, and they will continue to have input in the next round as well. So that was how that worked. So I feel like there was some, probably could have been more, and maybe that could help diversify the next exhibit with a little bit more consideration on that.
Yeah, I remember actually thinking about that at the time, and thinking about the Native perception on the Swinomish reservation. Obviously, folks are living this and have a viewpoint and a perspective, which didn't directly appear in the exhibit, as Dave said. They were organizationally, they were involved somewhat. But I think there's an opportunity there that would be good to pursue.
And it's a particularly big opportunity in Northwest Washington because there's several tribes in that area. There's the Swinomish, and there's the Stillaguamish, and there's the Sauk-Seattle, and the Lummi, and I'm going to forget the other ones, but I just want to make a point that there are a lot of Native folks who live in Northwest Washington.
Wonderful. Well, do you have any final comments you'd like to share with the audience? Thank you so much again, Rachel and Dave. I would like to invite all of you to have more food, mingle, grab coffee for the next 5 minutes or so. Those of you who need to leave, that's fine. Thank you for coming. And any students who wish to stay, please reconvene here in the front at 2 p.m. Thank you again. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.